matching. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Sorry, I got distracted by a notice. Do I want to continue?
Yes, please.
So yeah, is that enough about me, Myles, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that sort of puts some context in. So what I want to do, just to kick us off, is to put the book into some context, and why we thought when Myles approached me to support him in writing the book, and as we were writing it and beginning to talk to people, and now the book's beginning to get into the world, we're getting some responses, and people are recognizing that there's a timeliness, which I think the more we got into the writing process, the more we realized how timely the book was. And part of that is to do with the way the 2 years of the pandemic sped up, and lots of change which was already coming. So this isn't just about what's changed in the last 2 years. It's the way the last 2 years have accelerated a set of changes that have been coming for some time. And there's that phrase VUCA, which is used to describe the situation we've been living in, and that's been knocking around for a long time. So describing the business environment as volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And there's no doubt that the business world is operating in a much more fast-changing environment and all those things. But then there's also been this injection of new, younger generations with different expectations. First the millennials, and then now we're seeing Gen Z come into the workplace. And if you go back into the press that was looking at the millennials as they came in, and we began to understand what they were looking for in work, the business press described them as impossible to manage, disengaged, easily distracted, very demanding, entitled, and it was it was almost the establishment reacting to try and defend itself against these new sets of expectations. But actually, when you begin to get beyond that defense and look at what they were looking for a sense of purpose in their work. They were looking for work that empowered them. They were looking for a sense of work where they could develop themselves, and where there was a clear career path, and where there was a bit of freedom around how they actually delivered the work. And of course, that then was clashing against a management culture, which probably is still underpinning most management in most, certainly large companies, that goes all the way back into the early 20th century, and the whole sort of scientific management. And one of the quotes that stuck in my mind as we were writing the book was Frederick Taylor, one of the fathers of scientific management, who described workers as soldiers, and who theorized that a soldier will only work to the point at which they can avoid punishment. So his theory was that the role of a manager then was to constantly raise that level below which, if you don't hit this, you will be punished. And when you think that that was the kind of way that people were thinking behind scientific management, and then that they then progressive people built management theory off the back of that underlying assumption, sort of gets frightening, even in relationship to the 20th century. You bring that into the 21st century, and we hit a generation who basically said, no, not doing that anymore. And I think where the pandemic plays into that is that suddenly lots of other people got a taste of doing things differently that was forced on them, and forced on them for long enough that they began to realize that there were some things that could be done differently, which they quite liked. And lo and behold, it turns out a lot of those things are the things millennials and Gen Z were pushing for anyway. And so more established workers, shall we say, we won't use the word old, but more established people in work suddenly realized that actually, whilst we sort of didn't expect it, we weren't brought up to expect it, this is quite good. I quite like this. And so we land in this place where there are very different situations. We were very helpfully reminded at our book launch by an amazing lady who runs a metal polishing business, that we do need to be careful in that story to remember that there was a whole chunk of the workforce who basically went to work through the pandemic. And it's very easy in these sorts of conversations to pretend that everybody was furloughed, everyone was working from home, and actually there was huge numbers of people who kept going to work, and yet they're still experiencing the same cultural changes in the expectations of leadership and the effectiveness of leadership. So as we explored that and unpacked that and explored the model, that we began to realize that just felt that it was time for a way of describing how do you actually do this. And one, before I hand back to Myles, one lovely piece of feedback we got from somebody who got to read the manuscript before the book was published was, he said, what I like is I've read so many books that tell you what you should do, but they don't tell you how to do it. So they inspire you, but ultimately it dies away because it doesn't tell you how. And what Myles and I set out to do in this book was to give a practical answer to that dilemma I've just described. And we, obviously, it's that statement, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And there were already changes happening in some sectors that were showing the way forward. And Myles, if you want to take the reins and unpack.
Because so at one level, what we're saying is that the material in the book has been I've been teaching it for a long time, sometimes successfully, sometimes less so, so at one level, the book is relevant because it answers to some degree how you manage people who've got a different mindset and a different approach to work, and that's valid in itself. But actually, going beyond that, the thinking is also what's the management approach you need to get to high performance? So a lot of kind of thinking and talking. And two organizations began to kind of stand out with real clarity as organizations that experience the need to help their people perform to their best more and more and more. And those are, one of those organizations is the military, and particularly the US military got well ahead of many other organizations in its thinking about mission command. Or mission control, correctly. And the other is startups. So I've been, until November, I was inside a startup launching a mobile learning platform. And the everyday awareness that you were burning somebody else's money, and indeed my own money, but it put an emphasis on performance that isn't always there in other kinds of organizations. There's a caveat to that, which is that in some startups, the culture can become one of bullying, because that can be used as a stick to beat people with, that we're burning somebody else's money. So that shouldn't be forgotten. And I want to just take you to a slide or two to continue this. And that means I have to work out how to share my screen again. And that's, I hope it's going to give it to me and not to somebody else. So yeah, there we go. And it's that one.
Which one?
The one that I'm just hoping to show. There we go. And it's this slide in particular that I want, and it should come with that. Okay, so this is when the words decide to show themselves. Okay, there we go. So as I just said, share a need to get the best from their people. That's putting it a statement of the obvious. And now my slide doesn't want to move to the next one. Okay, well, and this is the critical thing is that they share an understanding ultimately that people can't act quickly, decisively, use their talents or develop them in an overly controlled or constrained environment. That's the primary point, that when you're trying to move quickly and have people act decisively, you can't control them because they start looking back up the line to get an answer from somebody else. So it demands a different way of thinking, and therefore it takes you to the next statement that both organizations have sought to resolve a specific problem: how to reconcile empowering people while not losing focus and control. So if I think of all the coaching skills workshops that I've run over the years, and one of the interesting things in working with management populations as opposed to working with coach populations was that when they started to grasp what the skills were and what the kind of underlying message around empowering and enabling people was, an element of tension would enter the room, because there was an immediate fear, which is that if I coach somebody, they'll just go away and do whatever they think they should do, and I'll lose control. And that was one of the biggest issues why coaching was perhaps not taken up to the degree that it might have been in management populations where they were trained in coaching skills. And it's not that actually we didn't describe the model that we're going to take you through here, but perhaps we didn't do it well enough. And perhaps we were ahead of our time. And I say that kind of not with any sense of grandeur or aggrandizement about it. And then if you think the other thing that happened, kind of started happening 10 years ago, that kind of time, was people try to have coaching cultures in the business, which completely forgets what the purpose of a coaching. You don't want a coaching culture in your business, you want a performance culture in your business. And coaching, particularly amongst the world of people who coach, has almost become too important. It's become a noun and not remained a verb. It's simply a way of doing something. It's a way of helping somebody perform to their best. It's a way of helping somebody learn and develop. And so we failed. And part of why we failed was for not understanding and addressing that well enough. And this model then attempts to create the conditions in which people can perform to their best. And what we're talking about then is a shift from command to control to what we're calling align and enable. And there's almost a one-for-one. Rather than command, rather than tell and instruct, seek alignment. So seek alignment about what the overarching objectives are. Seek alignment about what the person's role and job is, and that's the alignment between command and align, and then between control and enable. Rather than instructing people specifically on how to perform a task, coach them, and you gain, and then the benefits that come with that. And we'll speak about that. But as we said, we looked at those two different kinds of organizations. So mission control from the military, entrepreneurial mindset is a way of talking about what's happening in mature startups. So why startups are interesting is because the ones that are now successful, you'll find that they're led by people who are on their third startup. They're probably 45 plus or minus years old, and they're on at least their third startup. So what that tells you is that they've learned how to do it. So this is about borrowing the learnings from those people. And there we go. And what we have with our friends in the military, that there are many ways of talking about it. It's approach to leadership, they would say. I would argue that it also includes significant amounts of management, combines a powerful vision or intent, communicated to all, supported by decentralized leadership on the ground. So once the point of that earlier statement is that once people know the context and fully understand the context in which they're operating, they become capable of making decisions. If they don't understand that, they can't. So it generates swift, relevant decision-making and action within governing constraints. And that's why it works. You have somebody on some operation somewhere, maybe cut off from their commander. They've got to be able to act. And that is a way of talking about alignment. And that's just a supporting quote that we picked up somewhere along the way. The other thing, of course, that I don't think is on this page or the next is that a fundamental ingredient that makes this work is the trust between both people, between the commander and his troops, and the individual troop member with his commander or her commander. Entrepreneurial mindset, it's a slightly different way of thinking about it. Many parallels, and this is one of the ones that I was introduced to by Johan, who was running the startup, and he spoke, not only spoke but acted on this notion all the time: objective-driven execution, and he would literally make sure on a regular basis that people understood what the current overarching business objective was. So, and that meant that you'd be on a Monday morning call with him or whatever else, and we'd refresh that, or we'd talk about how, the fact that there'd been a shift in the client request or whatever else had changed or something, because they morph and change as time passes. So he was, and he when he first spoke to me about it, he'd describe it as good old-fashioned management by walking about, except not management by walking about to catch people out, management by walking about to ensure that people understood what the overarching business objective was and how what they were doing on their desk in front of them contributed towards that. We were all operating separately, but you can imagine in a small startup with all people working kind of in the same space, that's a very powerful way of keeping people focused and engaged. And again, allows for swift, aligned decision-making that translates into action. So there were we went to look at those two worlds for kind of collaboration around what we were doing. But I was going to do this in a different order, Ian. I'm going to go to our friend Assagioli, because here's some four critical elements that we have: clarity of vision and intent, aligned action with the primary objective, decentralized, and trust. Those were things we found. There's going to be some other words here, which we'll explain later. I'm trying to move swiftly on to my friend Assagioli, and I should be doing this another way, but I'm old-fashioned and my brain isn't functioning properly. Okay, so some of you I know have seen this before, but it's the fundamental dynamic that underpins what we're trying to say. And it was interesting to look to two places, two kinds of organizations that have different ways of thinking about leadership, and then actually go back to something much more fundamental. Assagioli was working in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Freud had hoped that he would become a fan of Freud and deliver his stuff, but he wasn't to his liking. So he created a body of knowledge that he labeled psychosynthesis. And what he was saying with this model, these two ideas here, love and will, was that there's two fundamental drives, the drives of human behavior. And one he called will, and the other he called love. And will he defined as a masculine energy. So to be clear, that doesn't mean that it's the sole preserve of men. It has that quality to it, while love has a more feminine energy to it. Will is about control. Love is about trust. will is about structures and constraints. Love is about letting things unfold, trusting the process. So they're quite different dynamics, and they show up differently. And clearly, you can have as I learned as a stepfather with a stepdaughter, where I, in order to ingratiate myself in the early days, the relationship was a very loving one, but that was where the energy came from. And unfortunately, my wife Jo was doing the same thing, and we began to realize that, or I did at any rate, that with the help of a good therapist, that wasn't good enough. That actually you needed to provide the boundaries and say no. So it was a hugely profound learning for me. So I had to. So here's where it gets interesting, is that it's not a question of shifting the balance between the two. That's often when there's a duality or a spectrum like this, where there are different kinds of energies. The game isn't to kind of move the dial from one to the other. The game is actually to do something quite different. It's to transcend and include. So transcend means to move up a level, but to a place that embraces both of those. And what our friend Asajoli did was he demonstrated, so that the top of the triangle demonstrates the transcend and includes. And he spoke about presence or wisdom. So if you put this in the context of a psychotherapeutic relationship, you can operate out of a place that's based in will, or a place in love, or you can move up and from being fully present to the situation in front of you. And I use the word wisdom in there because I think that's my word, not his, because I think that's part of what this is about. It's about holding your head up and looking more widely and more broadly and across time as well, rather than the instant. And from that place of being fully present, of making the better choice, which may be choose a willful thing or something that's based in love. So our model, which is lead, manage, and coach, and Ian's going to take you through that. It actually fits this absolutely perfectly, which is the lead piece is about that presence and the wisdom. It's about the context in which people are operating and being able to make a decision and give direction and advice from that place. Manage is about holding people to account. And the coach piece is the enable piece, which is that more, and you get the idea. So oh no, we don't want to go there. You want to go backwards. Ian, do you want the slide, or do you want to just?
We could get to the slide if you want to, but I can just talk through it.
I'll do the sensible way of getting to the slide. Yay, come on. Give it.
So with the model, obviously it first appeared in effective coaching. As Myles said earlier, the important thing is that we have lead, manage, coach as verbs. So this isn't a model for those.
Yeah, forgive me. The error here is that I've taken an old slide in my as I get madder. That should not be leadership. It should be lead, manage, and coach. 3 tight instructions. So forgive me, Ian.
Which is interesting immediately, because you talk to when I'm talking to businesses or within businesses, people always talk about leading in the context of leadership, whereas actually it's a bit off script, but there was a great little book by Harrison Owen called Wave Rider, and he talks about leadership that moves fluidly around the team, and the point and of dispersed leadership. And of course, when we get to dispersed leadership, it's about people leading. It's not about people being given titles. It's about people, as something becomes part of their responsibility, they can lead. Or and going back to the Myles's observation that one of the sticking points in promoting a coaching culture is that you have people who have management responsibilities saying, but this sounds all very loose, and how do I hold people to account? How do we stop people just going off and doing whatever they fancy doing? Where are the constraints? And this model provides the answer to that in the sense that by saying that if you're managing other people, there are three things you need to do. You need to lead, which is to provide the why. So to provide a context, why are we doing it? What is our objective? What is if you could even make that as high level as the mission or purpose of the business, but why are we doing what we're doing? And then there's the manage piece, that people who are leading teams need to have conversations in which they manage, in which they provide an answer to what are we doing? What are the specific goals that feed into our objective? But then there's a third conversation to have, which is to coach, to actually step back and say, so we employed you, you're in this team because you have a level of insight and expertise, and to use coaching tools to enable the individual team members and the teams to engage with the objective, to engage with the goals, and to work out for themselves how. So I've and all that then is built on that foundation of relate, because again, going back to Myles's comment on the mission command and entrepreneurial leadership, there is a need in both those models for trust, and the enabling leader model is based on building strong relationships. So lead, manage, coach, relate. Do we want to go through the three main ones in more detail, Myles? On those?
Yeah, I think we should. But before I give you the slide to do that, I just want to come back to the notion of align and enable and talk about how that fits in here, because so align happens in a number of ways here. It happens between the individual team member and in effect the organization. So there's an alignment between me, the team member, the organization for which I work, at the level of purpose or mission or overarching goals. That if my team leader can help me find some fit there, then I'm obviously going to be more engaged with the organization. So that's one level of alignment that we're looking for, at the level of why. And then the next level is again between the individual and the organization, but it's that what I do, my role, the tasks that I'm given, the objectives that I'm given, need also to resonate with me in some way, need to be meaningful, need to be challenging, whatever else. And then the third place that there needs to be alignment is slightly different, because there needs to be alignment, and it's obvious, between the why and the what. So in other words, the what somebody does drops out of the why. It's got to make a contribution to the overarching why. So that's kind of the alignment piece. The enable piece, as we've said, sits within the coaching piece. So that's just coming back to those words from command and control to align and enable. And then I'll give you the next page.
So if we sort of dig into that deeper, the team leader, to lead is to ensure that people understand the why and the what, and then we said, and doing how they're going to contribute to the organization's goals. So if we're looking to lead, the key activities when you're leading are providing perspective on the purpose and goals of the business, context and meaning for the team member, and connecting, as Myles said, the team members' aims with the businesses. And if you can do that, if a team leader can do that, then we know that team members become more engaged and purposeful. They make better and quicker decisions. And there's an argument here to be made. So one of the objections I often come across when I'm teaching this stuff is people say, I have a queue outside my door. And how do I get rid of the queue? And I don't have time for this. And the answer is, well, this is the answer to how you get rid of the queue. Because if you can align and enable your team, as we've been talking about, then your team members make better and quicker decisions because they understand why they're doing what they're doing. And so they have information, key information that can inform their decisions. So if we move on to manage, and we've got the key activities of manage. So lead is context, rationale, the why, and then there's needs to be alignment to what we're trying to achieve. So the activities are agreeing on role definition, on goals, on tasks, on the priorities, clarifying quality standards and expectations. There's an interesting sort of story there that I mentioned earlier, the lady at the book launch who ran a metal polishing company. And I thought this was a lovely example of what we're talking about here. And she said some years ago, they made a decision that everybody on the shop floor was a manager, in the sense that each of them manages their own piece of equipment. And the office-based management don't even give them a work order. They're told at the beginning of each week, this is what your machine needs to output, and these are the deadlines we as a business need to hit. And then the machine operator is left to decide, how am I going to manage that work that's coming through my area in a way that meets the business's objectives. So they're left with freedom to choose what order to do things in, how, and all those sorts of things. It's really interesting that even in a manufacturing shop floor type context, they'd found if you can help people understand their objectives and what you're trying to achieve, what the goals, what the tasks are, what the priorities are, then you can leave them and they'll make good decisions. So clarify quality standards and expectations, and the benefits then, I think I've pretty much covered those. People get a clear focus, they're given a mandate to make the decisions and do the work. And they understand the scope of the work and the constraints of the work. And if people have got those things, if they've got the why and the what, then we can go on to coach. And then it becomes about helping team members think through how to achieve their goals. So key activities, helping people find their own way forward rather than telling them what to do, giving people permission to make their own decisions and supporting them, that not solving their problems for them, and taking full responsibility rather than allowing them to take responsibility and not to direct them. And you can do that because you've done the alignment work. So this piece about holding people accountable and people operating with a freedom but within the boundaries. If you've aligned the people to the why and the what, then you can hold them responsible for delivering against those things in their own way without directing them. So the benefits, they get clarity on their decisions, greater ownership of their actions, and they learn and grow because they begin to think through their decisions rather than just be those people who follow orders.
Cool.
Does that catch anything, Myles, or would you add anything to?
No. We're going to take it. There's one more small piece to take, but I'm just wondering if there are any questions. I don't see anything particular in the chat, but if anybody's a question or observation or something that it's made you put together in your own head that you'd like to share with the rest of us, we'd be really interested to hear anybody. Just if you're up to it, just unmute your microphone and speak. I'd like to believe that we were that concise, but I know
something
better.
that comes up actually. Hi, it's Laura here.
Hi, Laura.
I've been having quite a lot of conversations this week about this new kind of like leadership style and how it's different now to 2 years ago, right? How are people managing their team working remotely or in a hybrid situation? And how does this framework, this model, fit into that? Is it that adaptable?
Yeah.
Does it matter? You know?
I think the real thing is, I've been, as a coach, and I know many people on the call here are coaches, and I teach this model, and I have done for years, to people that I'm coaching, because most of them are leaders in the organizations or senior managers in the organization. And it's like somebody turned on a light for them, because it's like they haven't had the distinctions between lead, manager, and coach. So they just kind of do this stuff, you know. So, and some of them do nothing at all. So there's no real genius in this other than in making the distinctions, because it tells that person, be it face-to-face or remote, that manager, that leader, that they need to have those conversations, and of course one links to the other, and that's where the power is. So you can do that equally face-to-face, but it works incredibly well to have on the regular, whatever it is, Monday morning catch up, or however frequently you meet, to make sure that you have that structure in mind and you know which circle you're in at any given moment. So, and you might have noticed on the pages where we got specific about what those things look like, mentioned Boost Leadership. So Boost Leadership was a mobile learning app that we created. And it's gone absolutely mad in China. We've got thousands of people working on it in China, managers who've never had much training. And what we do is we take that, people are given missions. So they do the training, which is a virtual interactive training. They learn the skills, and then when they've learned the skills, they get to apply them. So, and the application happens. They're each day, they get nudged to do the next thing. Like, feedback, for instance, was one of the things we taught people to do. And the system comes up and it tells you, okay, so your mission for this week is to give positive feedback to one member of your team. And on today, we're going to spend 15 minutes identifying who actually 5 minutes it is, identifying who that person is. And day 2, we get them to identify what the feedback they want to give is, except so it goes through the week. At the end of the week, they review their performance. But what the point about that anecdote is that when we break down these skills and prod people to do them, it makes a massive difference. And that's what shifts, is people have the distinctions. They've probably got some training, and that's where the difference is. And it happens equally remotely or face to face. But it puts the structure on the remote conversations that people haven't had. So those conversations, which tend to be more transactional anyway, are easier to have as a meaningful interaction.
And I think in hybrid, there's the issue that with hybrid working, almost by definition, people have more freedom, more empowerment to do things their own way, because they're not as observable, and you can respond to that in one of two ways. You can do what lots of businesses supposedly did, because there was a huge uptick in sales of spy software on foot that was integrated into business systems, so that people could see who was sat at their desk, and even pieces of software that could switch people's camera on to see if they were actually using their laptop. you can go that way, but that's a way to very upset employees. Or you can go a way of leading that means that if you can align and align people to the why and the what, and then coach them on the how, you then have confidence to step back and allow them the freedom that hybrid working gives them, because you know they're aligned to what they need to be doing. So I think it's a model that just works because of the nature of hybrid is to give people freedom. So there's a number of people I noticed put their hands up.
There's Gail, whom I haven't met for many years. Gail, how are you?
I'm good. And I have read the book, nearly finished the book, but I've also used this model in coaching, having been taught it by you, Myles. And there's a couple of things that come to mind. One of them is the trust thing within this new world where we're working, which Ian's just talked about. And that thing about how can I trust people if I can't see them? And one of the things that's kind of, when I think about this model, what's happening is every conversation, as you said, Myles, is becoming quite transactional. So do this, they go away and do it and then come back. And a lot of leaders I'm coaching just now, it is around that. How do you build that relationship again without being able to see exactly what people are doing every step of the day? So trust is a big thing there. And I also think there's something about leaders at the moment are looking to the future using old thinking, using thinking that was relevant years ago, like you said, the kind of Taylor thing, where it's about what can I do before I get punished. So there is a whole bit about what happens when I use the model, Myles, is the same as you. They go, oh my God, I've never even thought about the coaching piece. I've never even thought about, asking them how they would like to do it. Because we tend to employ people because they've got great potential and then tell them what to do. So given people that freedom to be able to think for themselves is actually quite a step for leaders just now, especially sort of senior leaders who have lost control really by having this hybrid situation that we've got. So getting them feeling comfortable with that through coaching is really powerful, and I think if you can give stories and stuff, which storytelling is always a great thing, then that really helps. But it still amazes me that we're really shocked when people put this in front of leaders. They're really shocked at the bit that they've missed out.
Yeah,
that still amazes me.
Yeah, and to come back in on the piece about trust, which is it's such an important thing. One of the exciting things about the why, the lead conversation, is that's a place where you can have a meaningful conversation without without you saying, and how are you and how's your family? You don't really care, so why are you asking me? So it's like it's a conversation. So in my view, trust is one of the ways in which trust is built is when you get some insight into the other person and they're willing, they open and give you some insight. So the why conversation is a really great opportunity to talk about the importance of the organization's overarching goals or mission or whatever, or vision or whatever it is, to say how, as the team leader, how that, what that means for you, and to invite the other person in. So actually it's a really safe way of having a more open, more trusting conversation. And that's some feedback that I got over the last few months that really surprised me, because it's obvious once it's been said to you, but wow, okay, so that's one of the levers that can open the trust piece.
Yeah, I think there's another piece that when you mentioned that coaching culture thing, it made me laugh, because I think that's what you were trying to do when we met. What the organisation I was working for was trying to do. One of the other things that when you speak to people, and there's an education for the people you're coaching as well, which is around performance conversations. So I ask people, when was the last time you did a performance conversation with your leader? And they say, oh, they haven't, or 6 months or whatever. And then I often ask them, well, what do you talk about when you're having a conversation with your manager then? Because if you're not talking about your performance, what are you talking about? And what I think this, having read most of the book, what this does is gives them the tools to let them, to raise their awareness that they're actually having that conversation as well, as opposed to just going through it they really actually have something to anchor in what they're talking about and the process they're going through.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Paul, you got your hand up as well. Thanks, Gail. It's great to hear you.
Yeah, so Myles, a couple of things. The first thing is that I want to correct you. You said something earlier on, right at the start there. You said it's not genius. Of course it's genius, particularly if you're selling this. I know we might all just have bought your book, so it is genius. So please.
Thank you.
So that's the first thing. The other thing I would say is that this change has been coming, but like all changes, change is not, we're taught in school that change is like a straight line. It isn't. It's in steps, and snakes and ladders is the ultimate way to teach people about change, because change is like this.
Yeah.
But what I would say is you've got a step change in leadership. But what you've got here is a useful framework, particularly if you're managing people at distance, where, or remotely, or whatever you want to call it, where you might only have one conversation with that person a day rather than actually walking past their desk 20 or 30 times. So you actually have a framework of what you can just check in on. And I think that in actual fact, what COVID has done, or what it's accelerated, for my mind, it's just accelerated things, is effectively it's taken the stabilizers off the leaders and off the individuals, and they've suddenly either had to buck up or fail. And so that's what I take from this. But I think there's something that's really key, and that is, and I tend to work collaboratively rather than as part of an organization these days. So I will work with people on different projects rather than actually being part of an organization. And I think you just have to know, like, and trust the people you work with, whether they're an employee or whether they're just a partner in a situation for a certain project.
Yeah.
But that's the way. That's my context.
Yeah.
On what you've actually presented. But as I say, don't forget. I know we like to be self-deprecating, but it's genius. Please.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I'll take that on the chin. Thank you, Paul. Tom, you also.
Hi, Myles. First of all, thanks for your generous mind share. You're a good chap. You've really got a good heart, so thank you for that. I think I've got some observations. I mean, I think this is a really good checklist. As you know, I'm actually a practitioner as chief exec or chair, so I've been applying similar sorts of things within a balanced scorecard type framework, which is quite a useful way of cascading some of those objectives.
Right.
I've got a couple of comments I think which are really helpful, and I hope you find encouraging. One is, I think it's important to realize that coaching is not a panacea. And I think a lot of coaches let themselves down very badly talking about coaching culture, because you're absolutely right, it doesn't provide the clarity or the boundaries for employees. I think the other thing is that as leaders, you need to know when to switch between the respective styles in terms of mentor, coach, and to provide direction as well, because as a director, you have to direct.
Right.
I think the other point I'd make as well is that, certainly speaking from my experience, I seem to be employing increasingly cleverer people than myself. Either I'm getting more stupid or they're getting cleverer. I'm not quite sure which, but I think it's important to acknowledge the steering from the bottom up. You talked about the steering from the top down. There's a lot of steering going from the bottom up, and I think particularly in this climate when there's lots of fearful external factors, there's lots of blind spots that can be created around that. So I think it's vital that employees are not just following the instructions or within their framework of the how and the what, as you put it, but actually they're steering the ship more and more. And I think the role of a leader is far more around even a chief exec in a crisis. I mean, as you know, I'm a turnaround manager. Is actually one of orchestrating. You know more than an orchestrator. Yeah. And anybody that comes in thinking that they know better, I think, is on shallow ground. I think the last point, which I think Gail made, is around the thinking. I think it's about the skills, in the dialogue, when people are having conversations, to understand the blind spots and some of the psychology of the dialogue that goes on, because, it's very easy for an organization to get misaligned if the dialogue is limited, if people are afraid to talk about X, Y, Z because of X, Y, Z. So I think but overall, yeah, thank you very much for. I hope those comments are helpful.
Yeah. I think the model was kind of created from a top-down world, and the book is the enabling manager, so it is in that context. So we didn't find a way of Ian spoke earlier in this conversation about leading rather than leadership, and we perhaps could emphasize that a bit more, because what you say, I was speaking, we're in temporary accommodation or just have moved out of, and the guy in the next house is a headmaster of a local school, and he was talking about personalized education to me. He spoke about it much too much. So it's like, I have to go. But he was so passionate. And actually what he was saying was in terms of not just some really good stuff about kind of congruent with coaching principles about personalized education. His listening for what his pupils were looking for, as opposed to what the curriculum was saying, was about the most profound thing I took from the conversation, other than being interested in what he was saying. And and hopefully there's people are more open to that, have greater skills, have more empathy than perhaps earlier generations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think just one thing on that, I think empathy as well shouldn't be underestimated, because I've noticed that empathy is actually the thing that holds teams together.
Yeah.
In difficult times, it's all very easy leading when things are easy. It's not the test of anybody's skills. I think empathy. So there's space as well for the relationship side, which when things get tough, empathy is what I've noticed.
Yeah.
Holds, that is the glue to hold. So maybe that something else, one of your models maybe, but
yeah.
It's interesting. I'm quite visual, Myles. It's interesting where you put relationship as a box below the other things. Is there a reason for that, or is it?
Yeah, it's the foundation. It's intended to be foundational. It's intended.
Foundation of everything
represents that if you don't have that, nothing else works. Is the kind of yeah.
Okay, and then the trust would sit within there.
Yeah. So yeah. So
to all three, isn't it?
Yeah. So yes. We may need to remake the model to be not relationship, but lead, manage, coach, trust. Might have been more. Oops. Next edition. Next edition. Actually,
maybe.
Fuck! What a thing to learn at this stage. Thank you so much.
I can change my I can change my diagram that I've drawn here. Yeah.
Anyway, that's fantastic. What a gift. What a gift.
I don't know if you've read it, but it covers a lot of similar principles. But Covey's book on Trust and Inspire.
No, I haven't read it. Yeah.
So yeah, okay. you obviously there will be a lot of common ground. Maybe one that you want to, you may not learn a lot. You know a lot already, but I'm sure there's a little nugget that you might pick up.
Fantastic.
Myles, I think what I think is interesting with the relationship word as well, though. I think there's two things there. We talked about trust and we talked about empathy, and those things are both very, very important relationship building skills. So I think when we talk about a relationship, it's almost like all those things have to be there for it to be a genuinely open relationship. You need trust, you need empathy, you need self-awareness, you need all those things that will help that relationship to build and grow. So one of the things just that we mentioned, when we talked about this before years ago, we talked about the left-hand side where the organisation's making all the decisions, and then the right-hand side is the individual that's making that's engaging. That moved on? Have you moved on from that?
No, not at all. It's just in the confines of one conversation. It's a question of how much you want to speak about. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Myles, can I just throw in a couple of thoughts here, which I don't know, maybe they're implicit, but I'm going to throw them in anyway.
Yeah, please do.
I'm thinking about values. I'm thinking about ethics, business ethics. So I'm thinking moral values and business ethics in that sense. And the other thing I wanted to throw in is that what I feel is missing beyond empathy is compassion. And so I'm kind of wondering, I mean, obviously I can draw my own conclusions, but I'm kind of wondering where those three elements might fit in. Okay, I'm just going to stop there and see what you say.
No, I'm not sure what to say. I think, other than I think you're perfectly right. The intention was to create a book which was very kind of almost axiomatic and pragmatic and cut to the chase and cut to the point. But I can't disagree with you at all, and nor would I want to. But that they're not embodied in that model. It's very much about the actions that take the interaction between the team manager and the team member.
Okay.
It is part of the. We speak later about leader identity, and arguably not enough, because how you embody those things as a leader is so critically important. So we haven't spoken a lot about how the leader might show up.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a criticism of you.
No. I'm how could it be? This is a conversation between lots of adults who are interested.
I think it's about layers potentially as well. So for me, some of those stuff like business ethics and personal ethics sit as part of peeling back the layers of what it is to build a trusting relationship. So it's really interesting once you start peeling back. How do you build a trusting relationship? I think you almost have got to end up in some of the things you've been talking about, Helen.
Well, I hope. I hope. And the reason I raise these points is because of the climate that we're living in now.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's kind of chaotic in many ways.
Yeah.
And the more coaching I do, the more I realize that these elements are vitally important in terms of how people perform. So that's the reason I'm raising them. And the fact that you only have to look at the politics of what's going on, and I mean that with a small p, never mind the big P. What's going on in businesses, what's going on in corporations, that needs to be addressed in terms of trust, for instance.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting area. You know, I'm a coach, and I think empathy and compassion comes as a sort of natural behavior of many coaches. I can obviously only speak for myself. But I think in the context of leadership, sometimes I almost pose it as a question is, can you have too much of those things or not? And I don't know the answer to that, but
it's part when it goes. That's the beauty of that love and will model. Suggests that yes, that if there's too much love, too much empathy, then then particularly in a relationship where there's some authority, parent to child or manager to manage. Not that I equate the two, but that kind of an overly loving relationship, an overly empathetic relationship that doesn't know how to create boundaries is hugely damaging.
Exactly, which is why I'm raising compassion as a possible alternative to empathy, because empathy can bleed into sympathy, and sympathy is indulgence in my book. It's an overindulgence of the person's state of mind or issues or whatever. So,
and how do you find compassion?
Well, I'm thinking compassion in terms of thinking of compassion as a verb. So actively being finding compassion for a person's state of mind, so where they are. I suppose it's linked also to generous and committed listening. It's coming closer and closer and closer in that sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel that empathy is perhaps overused.
Yeah.
This is not personal, folks. This is just the way
No, it's great. No, it's fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah.
And again, it's about I'm hearing what Ian said about the layers, that actually the coaching circle of our diagram is really about that place of the listening and the compassion and the attending and all of those important things.
I think what I say, I think Myles may be helpful. I think what you've described is the structure to operate within. And I think in terms of, there's then the issue of communication and dialogue. I think for me, empathy is about getting to know people beyond the workplace, which is very important. And it develops a relationship. I think compassion is, I don't know, semantic. I don't know if it's significant or not, but I think that the third part is actually when people open their mouths and communicate with each other, how effective is that? Does that support? And I think in terms of this emphasis of too much love, what happens if it starts going wrong? Leaders need to have the self-awareness to know when to change. And if it's going wrong, then you start missing targets. And that's what happens, frankly. So
but love comes in different guises, doesn't it? I mean, love can be soft and comforting. Love can also be hard and akin to accountability. If I care enough about you to call you to account in terms of your performance, that's going to be more fulfilling for you ultimately than not. So
I think love in a business context is being able to put somebody else first over and above yourself. So I don't think it's much else.
Okay.
I think the Assagioli potentially captures this tension between love and action, and love that holds people to account. I think I'm understanding him right, that he would say that love that holds people to account is recognizing that out of love, I need to exercise some will in this situation and hold people to account. There's an interesting Buddhist anecdote I came across last week. And again, it gets into the semantics, but they were talking about the potential weakness of empathy, because they defined empathy is to feel what another person is feeling. And therefore, the story was, if I come across a man on the road who has a boulder, who's pinned to the ground with a boulder on his chest, and I feel empathy, then I'm paralyzed with a sense of the pain they must be going through and all those things.
Exactly.
And what I need, I can't remember whether he used the word compassion or what the active word he used was, but what I need is not empathy in that moment, but action that enables me to go and take the boulder from off the man's chest.
No, lovely. Lovely.
But I think that's, for me, Assagioli captures that in that balance of love and will.
I think the point about that is meeting people where they are. Jesus was probably the greatest leadership role model ever existed, and he always met people where they are. It's very easy to meet people where you want them to be, i.e. to move that boulder off their chest, but actually they might want to have that boulder on their chest, using a metaphor. But I think it's, I don't know. I think for me, it's just about when people open their mouths, it's a lot of it's a heart thing. How effective is that communication? Where the flaws, where the blind spots, what's not being talked about? That's a sort of oil. I think what you've described today, Myles, very effectively, so well done, is the sort of structure around the why, the what, and the how. There's then the dialogue side of it, which is a bit different.
Very good. Very good. Thank you all. Thank you all. Laura.
Can I make, sorry, Myles, can I make one comment? I need to go, but one thing that does strike me, if I may just say.
Yes, please.
It seems that getting the balance right is obviously so much better for the team, for their own peace of mind, inspiration, and the rest of it. It's also excellent for the performance of the whole organization. But of course, it's so good for the leader as well, to be so much less directive, the effort it takes. I see so many business leaders who are, absolutely up to there because of their own actions, because they don't delegate, because they do direct, because they aren't properly leading, they're not asking why. It's good for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Just, and that might be so obvious, but just lining BFO for me.
No, it's great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you very much, Myles. I must go, but thank you. I'll see you again. I know. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Take care. Take care. Very good. Before we wrap up, is there anything anybody else would like to add?
No. Thank you.
So I got two little announcements to make. We'll on the 25th, I think, is of August, and there'll be something coming out to announce it. There'll be another webinar on leader performance. So not leadership, leader performance. So what defines my coaching is that I'm not particularly interested in. I am, obviously, but it's like the driver is the performance. So leader performance means you, the leader, and your performance, and what coaching looks like that focuses on that. So there's another webinar then, and then in September on the 20-something, I can't remember exactly because my brain is fried, or as my wife said the other day, my brain is singed. I'm doing a one-day event which is about coaching in flow, and there are two parts of that, which is the part about you, the coach, being in the state of flow so that you do your best coaching, and how do you get there and increase your capacity to deepen that flow state, and then what it begs then is and how do you get the person you're coaching into that flow state so they do their best being coached, they do their best thinking, their most creativity, their blah, 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 all of those things. So it's a one-day event. We'll use some of Tim Galway's inner game models, and we'll go on a tennis court for 2 hours in the morning so that people will be freed up from having to try and solve the problem, because the problem is on the tennis court and you don't know about that. So we'll give you a set of coaching, approach to coaching that just allows that you to be reliant on the other person's capacity to learn. And that's a very liberating and powerful couple of hours. And then we'll bring that into a more conventional workshop in the afternoon. So those are two, we'll be announcing those over the next few days, and it would be great to see anybody who can show up, because they're going to be huge fun. So thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you, Ian, for joining me. That was a very kind of you, and kind and gracious and generous of all of you for showing up and saying what you needed to say. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Have a great evening.
Yes, Myles.
You too.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Good to see you, Gail. Real treat. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm unmuting. I was just writing in the chat there. Thanks, I have missed your musings.
Well,
so yeah, that was really good. It was really good. I think the interesting thing for me is trying to say the model is the model, right? And it's the process almost. Bits of, you've got to be able to do the why, you've got to be able to do the what, and then you say to people, right, come on, how are you going to deliver this? And work with them that way. And the relationship thing is all the other bits, isn't it? It's all the other bits. So no, it's good. It's good. It's good.
Yeah, and really a pleasure seeing you.
Yes, you too. You too. Thank you very much. I'll come along to the next webinar. I don't know if I'm going to be able to come to the London thing because I've got stuff on in September. So, but I'll definitely come along to the next webinar.
Great. Be great to see you.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you feel that? Were you happy how that went?
I wasn't happy with myself because I don't think I've ever been this tired, and I've got to drive to the other side of Birmingham tomorrow, north, Shifnal Golf Club.
Oh yeah, that's just down the road from us.
I've got a one-on-one client who's actually an action coach who wants to be the best coach in the world, and it's complicated. His brother is the director of a company that he's also a director of, that is their kind of, it's family-owned business. So he's doing the coaching, the one-on-one training with me. And I said, yeah, we have to have a workshop. We have to do the golf thing. And he said, okay, so the way we're making that work for everybody is that his brother is coming and their ops manager is coming. So we're doing the golf in the morning. And so I've got to get up and be out of the house at 6:15 or something to get there.
Yes, you'll
I'm just fucking shattered.
You'll be flying past Wolverhampton at some point, I think, on that journey.
Yeah, I think it's 3 hours and something from here. It's not. It's yeah. Anyway. So but thank you. Well. What did you think, briefly?
I thought it went well. I was probably like you, very self-critical, but that's just part of the course, isn't it? You come off anything.
I think the thing that I learned, and it's because I'm tired, that it normally happens kind of intuitively and instinctively and automatically, which is to be very clear about the point that I'm making with each thing. And personally, I wasn't as clear about the point that I was telling the story, and the story is okay, but if I don't say, and where this is landing is here, then that's what I was missing today. But no, great group of people.
Yeah, and it's really interesting the difference in delivering it to that a group of people who are largely coaches. So they then start peeling away the layers and getting into stuff that sits around the model and their own shit. If you're delivering it to managers, it's just about doing their job. And by the way, this is still recording, so.
Oh, right. We better. I'm sure we can cut that.
You need to edit this bit out.